Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast featuring real conversations with conscious objectors to the status quo. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, we have doctoral candidate and marriage and family therapist Manny D, who is studying drug-assisted psychotherapy. Together, we talk about spontaneous, mystical experiences, our shadow selves, and learning to decode your personal symbolic language. Y'all, this is a fun episode. If you're curious about the unconscious, dreams, what it all means, then this is an episode for you. Check in, y'all. I have been trying to pay attention to my dreams. I think everyone who follows the podcast would know that I am a little bit skeptical of all things woo-woo and spirituality, but there is a lot here to learn. And so I really hope you enjoy this episode and come away learning something new. Tune in. How you feeling? Are you nervous?
Yeah, I am slightly. I'm not nervous in like what I want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more just like this is the first time like me putting my voice out there.
Sure,
and
yeah.
I guess there's some nervousness behind like using my voice.
Yeah. Could you say more?
Yeah, it's interesting now because I know I was referred to you through Destiny, who's also a fellow doctoral student, and now we are doctoral candidates. Because we're done with coursework. Yes, so excited.
So exciting. Yeah, congrats.
Thank you. And I think it takes some time to let that sink in that I'm now an expert on something, and that my voice has weight in certain areas. Not that my voice didn't have weight before, but it's with that title, with that doctoral, candidate title, and that kind of portrays to the world that I have expertise in certain areas. And for me as a, queer Latino, student, like that's a lot. That's a lot to hold at times.
Yeah, exactly.
That privilege, to own that privilege.
Right. Yes. With all your intersecting identities, and to have that privilege now with the candidate aspect of the doctoral, certification and the credentials that, what does your voice mean? And what can it mean to other people? It has a different weight to it to a degree.
Yeah, definitely.
And so because of that, then it's like, what is the implications for what? Are you worried that maybe someone will take you the wrong way, or maybe?
No, not at all. It's just like I've always wanted to do this. Like I've always wanted to go out there, and I've always just been waiting like for the right time, right?
Sure.
And I keep putting it off, and now it's like, okay, like there's other people out there using their voice on certain subjects that I am more expertise in, but I'm not using my voice. And that's where the dilemma comes from. It's like there's so many people out there sharing information, and when it comes to some of these important topics, for example, like my dissertation's on psychedelic therapy or the use of entheogens, and that's a very controversial topic, and specifically because of the history of the war on drugs and how psychedelics were portrayed in the past and how they were used in a way that could be dangerous to some. So now with this new third wave, we have a responsibility to be respectful of the medicine and how we use it in this term during research.
Definitely. Yeah, I completely agree. It's a whole novel. I mean, not novel, I guess, novel within our Western psychology framework. Thank God that we're getting finally to this point of recognizing this medicine that has been around for thousands of years, right, in other cultures. I'm thinking about what you were saying when there's people who use their voice that they're not necessarily like educated or have the credentials to use that voice. But then to you're sitting in that thinking like, when is the right time for me to start speaking my voice?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, what are the conditions for you that you think would be the right time?
I wanted to accept this invitation. I've been having invitations a lot lately.
Sure, yeah.
Being invited to speak at like a conference in Berkeley and
Nice,
these
congrats.
types of things. No, thank you. And it's just, it's just, I feel like the universe is just like pushing me out there. Like, like you're not going to do it on your own. We're going to do it for you. So, so I think this is a good segue into that path. But yeah, I think a good starting point for us, I guess, would just maybe I'll just run through kind of like my path and how I ended up here.
Please do.
Okay. Now that I'm feeling a little bit better.
Good.
So my name is Manny Dominguez, and as I was sharing, I am a third-year doctoral student at Pacifica Graduate Institute, and I just finished my coursework, so we are now moving into the dissertation phase. I study drug-assisted psychotherapy. I'm also a marriage and family therapist out of San Joaquin County. Currently, I work with young adults between the ages of 15 and 25 with more of a severe diagnosis of schizophrenia. So I work mostly with quote-unquote schizophrenics, which is interesting for me, but I'll circle this around.
Yeah.
But how I started here. So again, like I said, I am a queer identified Latino male, born and raised in Stockton, California. Grew up in private Catholic school. And my coming to age journey was kind of confusing, right? You know, like being a brown body from a more traditional family in this, institution of Catholicism, going to private school and, coming, and starting to, navigate my identity, my sexual orientation. It was confusing because of all the religious, propaganda and all that stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow.
That's how it all started. And then after I graduated high school, I moved to Santa Barbara, and it was a total like culture shock. And I started studying religion and psychology because I was fascinated. I was like, okay, so I am different than my peers, and I want to know why. So that really started my journey. And I did both. I did two different routes at the same time. On one hand, I was studying religion. On the other hand, I was studying psychology. And for my bachelor's, I was mostly focused on biological arguments for like homosexuality. So I was really researching, diving deep into like epigenetics, those types of topics. And what made me queer? Trying to find that answer. What made me queer?
Wow.
On one side, but on the other side, I was studying religion. And if I was born this way, then why is religion looking at me in a negative view? So I was trying to hold both of those things. And I'm 18 years old at the time, so my thought was like, I was worried that I would be bullied eventually. And I thought, well, if someone wants to throw religion in my face, then I should know about everyone's religions, so I have something to protect myself with. So I really started studying every religion I can get my hands on. I studied like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Taoism, Zoroastrianism. Like I was just getting into all the different religions. Yeah, and it was and I loved it, and it was fascinating. And then I started seeing more of these like patterns of these prophets having numinous experiences, which will tie back later on. So I was like fascinated with all these different religions and all these different prophets and like their stories about how they came in contact with the divine and how that experience happened. So fast forward, after college, after my undergraduate degree, which I ended up majoring in psychology and minoring in religious studies. I eventually took a break. I married my high school sweetheart at the time. So we had me and my husband kind of settled down. We moved back home, did all the things that you thought you would want to do, got the house behind the gates in a private, community. We had the Mercedes and Volvo in the parking lot. We had we had our lab and our pug, and we just had our like little life that we thought we wanted. And I really like one day came to the realization that something was missing in my life. And that's when, which I think you've heard this many times, that's when I entered my own dark night of the soul. And that's when things got dark for me. And I ended up deciding to go through a divorce. And during that period, it was really an underworld journey. Luckily, this all happened when I was about 24, 25 years old. So this is
young though.
Yeah, this is like 3 years ago. I mean, it's like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So 8 years ago, I was like 24, 25, going through this dark night of the soul underworld journey, trying to figure out like, all right, I thought I had everything that I wanted in my life, but there was something more missing. And I started questioning everything. I started questioning who I was. And that relationship was I was in that relationship for about like 8 years. So I was questioning things like, what I like to eat. Like, do I really like to eat pesto? Like, do I really like to eat pesto? Or is that just because my partner likes to eat pesto? Like people don't understand, like these experiences, like really like you tear apart yourself. But it's meant, it's necessary, right? It's necessary to have a death to be reborn. And that's the whole, underworld journey, dark night of the soul kind of experience. Is like there's something needs to die to give room for something new to come out of such death. So that process actually lasted about it started, the darkest times were about 3 months for about 90 days. And I was just in this very dark place. And then I had what I can only explain as like a spontaneous mystical experience that really like brought me out of that dark place and kind of like shifted my focus.
Yeah.
And it's happened to be in the same time that I came across this documentary called The Spirit Molecule by Dr. Rick Straussman. He was the first professor in the United States to get approval to start studying psychedelics again. And that was in like the early 90s. So after his studies, he published this documentary in 2010 about his research findings. And they were just amazing. He studied a chemical called dimethyltryptamine, also known as DMT. His team was so surprised by the subjective reports of all the research participants, how they all had very similar experiences of going to a place. And again, like from my previous research in religion, it sounded very similarly to the same numinous experiences, the near-death experiences of, they felt like their soul left their body. They went to this place, and in this place, it was inhabitant. There's other beings there. They felt love and peace. It felt familiar, like they'd been there before. Some went up a ladder. Some saw a bright light. Some heard humming sounds. Some heard bells or horns. It's all very archetypal when it comes to all these other religious stories. And then they came back from that experience, which a DMT experience usually only lasts about 15 to 20 minutes. It's a very short acting. And when I heard this, I was like, what the heck? Like, I was so put off by, in a positive way. I was like, there's that we can replicate a near-death experience by using a chemical compound that only lasts about 20 minutes. For me, that was a very huge turning point in what I wanted to do. At the same time, I started reading works by Carl Jung. And Carl Jung was a very well-known psychiatrist. Started the Jungian psychology school of thought, of course. But he was basically the first person to combine religion with psychology. So his work is really spirituality and psychology mixed into one, which differs from mostly all other schools of thoughts. So here I'm at this point of my life where, like my undergraduate was in psychology, minored in religious studies, right? And then here I am now going through this dark night of the soul. And now all of a sudden I come across this chemical compound that can basically create a mystical experience and recreate a mystical or near-death experiences, and then also coming across Carl Jung. So I decided that I needed to go back to school, and that was really my entry point. And a side note, there's also a personal connection to this because my mom is an addict. So my mom is an addict. I was raised by a single father. So I bring that up because in my mind, I was thinking like, what if we could give these people who are addicted to drugs or anything, give them, say like this compound DMT, and they have a near-death experience, and they come back after 20 minutes and they want to change their lives. Like, what's the possibilities of us using this to heal people? And that's like, that was the first thought I had and again, like, this is very early on in my educational careers for me to like, that was the first thing that I thought of. And that's the first thing. And that was like my major motivation.
Yeah.
It's like, how can we utilize this to heal people in a more effective and efficient way?
Right. And
yeah.
And could this save my mom?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or could this have or save someone else's mom? Yeah.
Yeah.
Too. Or can this help? There's so many other layers. Now we know that now because research has been rampant over the last 12 years. But 12 years ago, these conversations were just starting again. Yeah. So now we fast forward, and I ended up I looked up schools nearby. I'm in California. So I decided to go to John F. Kennedy in Berkeley to study depth psychology or Jungian psychology. My master's thesis was also on psychedelic therapy. After my master's thesis, it was recommended me to continue on for my PhD because of how large my master's thesis ended up becoming. And so then I decided to go back to school and go to Pacifica, a graduate institute in Santa Barbara. Interesting enough, it's a full circle because that's where I started out when I was 18. And I started out at the City College, but going from the City College in Santa Barbara, going to JFK for my master's, and coming back to Santa Barbara for my PhD, it's been a full circle ride. And and that's where I am at today.
Amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your story, right? This whole journey, it seems like fate, whatever we want to call it, was kind of coming for you, whether you liked it or not. He was saying, here it is. This is what you're going to study.
Yeah.
All these little pieces along your way were like clues to getting to where you're at now, which is so exciting, right? And
have you heard of the term like synchronicity?
Yes, tell me more, but I want to hear what it means to you.
So synchronicity is a concept termed by Carl Jung, and he noticed that there are coincidences, right? Throughout our days, we might have these experiences that we feel like it's coincidental or coincidences, but sometimes something might happen that seems like a coincidence at first, but as you look more deeply into it, is very meaningful to that person. So then it's like, what are the odds of this happening on that meaningful level? That's more like a synchronistic event.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have an event that seemed like a coincidence at first, but later on we feel like it's more meaningful than that, that is what would be called like a synchronicity or a synchronistic event. And I bring this up because I didn't really go into what really brought me from my master's to my PhD.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't touch upon that. I was writing my master's thesis on psychedelic therapy. So, and I want to go into that a little bit more so you can kind of see like the synchronicities that got me to Pacifica. So initially when I was writing my master's thesis, again, I think there's a part of me that maybe there's a slight arrogance within me that thought like I knew everything I needed to know on this subject. So I started writing my thesis, and I wrote about 33 pages in, and I got stuck. And I had writer's block, and I wasn't moving anywhere. And so I go back to my professor, again at JFK, and he leads the class in this guided meditation. And this guided meditation was basically to help us with our research phase. And so the guided meditation that he led us through, basically what happened was he had us all close our eyes, relax in our classroom. And then he asked us to call to a large table some ancestors for our own counsel. And so the idea was that we're going to invite our ancestors to help us and counsel us in this guided meditation. And I'll just put and I just wanted to, on a side note, I'm more of a skeptical person.
Sure.
I'm more, even though I went to this holistic alternative
yeah.
psychology school, my background again was mostly neuroscience when it came to psychology. And so here I am doing this guided meditation, thinking that I'm pretty much done with my thesis. I already have this 33 pages written. I thought I was basically done. It was all figured out. And that I was just gonna graduate, I was done. I felt like I was done in the process. But this guided meditation happened, and he asked us to call in our ancestors. And when he did that, there was this lady that appeared in my mind's eye. And this lady, she looked native. She looked like Latin native. She had I remember she had this braided pigtails hair with black and gray strands. She had this more native Hispanic outfit, regalia type of thing. And I'm asking for these ancestors to appear to help me, and all she starts doing, she starts laughing at me in my mind's eye. So I have this lady that appears, and again, like I said, I never had this experience before. I can't make this up.
Sure. Yeah.
This is the first time for me having this type of experience, and she starts laughing at me, and I'm just like, okay, what's so funny?
Yeah,
what are you laughing at? And basically what was communicated to me, I don't know how, but it was just oh, she was laughing at me you think you're so smart. You think you're she's like, you think you're inventing something new, or you're discovering something new. She's like, if you really want to know, you have to look back. And that was it. And it ends, and then we regroup as a cohort, and we talk about what happened. But I'm like, who is this lady?
Yeah.
Who's this lady laughing at me, and why is she telling me why is she telling me to look backwards? So I'm involved in one of these family Facebook pages for my family, and after this incident, somebody posts a picture of my great grandfather and his mother, and so that's my it's my great grandfather and his mother, so it's my great grandmother, and it was her, it was the lady. So there's a picture, this picture appears, and it's my great grandmother, and that's the lady that appeared in my mind's eye. So I was like, okay, this is too weird. And basically, she after doing a little family research, she was the last person in our family to be a part of the Tarahumara Raramiri tribe in Chihuahua, Mexico. Mm-hmm. So that I had a strand. So I started pulling that strand. So at this point, this backing up, at this point, I was studying psychedelic therapy, and one of my specializations were also in dream working. So those are my two. And on top of that, before, this is a side note, but on top of that as well, I'm also a runner. I usually run about 10 miles a day, which has always been, it's always been,
wow.
It's always, and that's usually the response I get from my friends.
Yeah.
I've always been a runner, and I did track, cross country, and I just always been a runner. It's just always been my self-care. And I use that to dissipate energy, when helping my clients. That's my self-care on the side, so I can get renewed and go back to helping. So anyways, I go to Amazon, of course, and I Google the Raramiri tribe or Tarahumara from Chihuahua, Mexico, and try to see what kind of books can I buy, because I need to figure out what's going on, what is she trying to tell me. And I find 5 books. The first book that I pick up and I read, basically it just blows me away, and I'm trying to remember what exactly the first sentence was, but basically it said, it is common when a Raramiri greets another person, the question they usually start the day with is, what did you dream last night? And that was the first sentence, and I just had to I just had to put the book down, and I was just synchronicity number 1. It was and as I started getting more and more into their practices, I found out that they've been doing dream work, and they've been doing what is called Jikuri rituals, or using psychedelics in a special ritualized way to heal people of different ailments. And on top of that, where most people know about this tribe, the Raramiri, it's that it is common that someone from this tribe who's a runner can run up to 200 miles in a session. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. 200 miles. So that's
Wow.
there's a book called Born to Run, and there's actually been research where scientists have flown out to do studies on this tribe because of, why can these people run like, hundreds of miles without, dying.
Yeah, yeah.
And they've noticed that with this tribe that their blood pressure actually decreases during these workouts, where most of our blood pressures increases when we work out.
Interesting.
Theirs actually decrease, and they don't have the same types of, I guess, biological responses to working out
Sure.
and long distance running. And back in the day, they were actually used to be the couriers. People would
Mm-hmm.
hire them to deliver like mail or packages. And because they can run for so long, you would hire them to deliver something to a different town or village, and they would do these long distance runs.
Wow.
So yeah, and then after that, I returned to our family Facebook page, and I asked a question because I was curious. I was asking the question like, who
Sure.
else in our family are runners? So I posed that question on Facebook, like, hey, who else in our families are runners? And the responses that I got were just so synchronistic that not only many people responded that they ran, but not only that they ran, that many of them had high school records, state championships. They just got into it instinctually. They like their parents didn't run. They just like was drawn to it. And it was just amazing. It was amazing for these stories. I have one of my uncles. He runs city to city. He goes on these long
Yeah.
runs, and it's like where does this come from, and how are we drawn to these certain things? Why was I drawn to dream work? Why was I drawn to psychedelic therapy?
Right.
And this whole, and then I returned to my master's thesis, and it went from like 33 pages to 100 pages, just incorporating the fact that, okay, we are looking at these plant medicines to help us heal psychopathology in Western medicine. However, there's all this history that's been there for thousands of years, that why are we reinventing the wheel? And I know we started this conversation about like our voice and finding our voice,
Mm-hmm.
but when I went to Pacifica for I'm at Pacifica for my PhD. My topic now is finding the intersection between Western and indigenous perspectives on using entheogens and psychotherapy to heal. So I'm trying to find that intersection. It's just interesting because when we talked about, like I'm also trying to find my own voice on this subject. And it's just curious after this whole experience that I am also physically the intersection. I'm from the
Yes.
tribe, and I'm the first in my family to be college educated, but I'm also going to be the first in my family to be a doctor. And like,
Wow.
why was I brought here into this time and space
Mm.
in this subject? And I think it's for me to highlight this intersectionality between, again, Western and indigenous perspectives when we're talking about using plant medicine and psychotherapy to heal. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that's a long-winded story of how I am here today with you. Talking.
Yes. Yes. And what a journey it is. Look at the smile that's on your face, right? I mean, that's coming from all these steps of, yeah, synchronicity, these moments, when you look back and see that, yeah, this was all planned for you before maybe you even knew, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm so excited for you and so happy that you're on this journey, right? And I mean, that took even from that initial step of when you were in your marriage and feeling like something was lacking to listen to that voice then and not to ignore it and squash it and push it down. It took listening to that and changing everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, like at that moment when you take that switch, I'm sure, you can't really know where you're going to land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Stepping into the unknown.
Yes, 100%. But to get to this place now where you feel like all of this was almost in line for you. And it's just,
Exactly.
I hold that duality knowing that, when we're in that beginning place, it's so like, yeah, where am I supposed to go? Is this the right step? And, even along the way, there's that question constantly. And I'm sure it still comes up even at moments now, right? Where you're like, is this still the right? But when you look at it, all of these other pieces were coming together to make this path for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, and I think that brings us to the question of my dissertation. And the question is that, we know that entheogens or psychedelics, we know that they are effective at healing an array of mental health concerns. We know that they're effective at healing depression, anxiety, PTSD, addiction. And we know that we have all the research studies coming out now, with us, with all those results. And my question really was, why? Why are they effective? Like how? Like my question entering into this project was, like what makes it effective? How can other therapists or healers, where can we find that information of like, how can we make, what makes one healer or sitter or a shaman or a therapist more effective than the other? And to get there, we have to understand how they are effective and what is going on. And that's where my path started. And as I started diving deeper, and I'm pretty sure, like, I'm sure you've heard like the idea of our shadows when it comes to like Jungian psychology, but according to Carl Jung, like, every person has a shadow part of themselves, right? We're born, in his eyes, we're born whole as a child. And as we get older, we learn what parts of ourselves to kind of repress so that we can fit better into society. The issue is that those parts of ourselves that we repress, we're losing a little and little of ourselves every time we do such. In indigenous language, we might be talking about soul loss. As we are losing parts of our soul, we become sick. And the same thing with us in Western medicine. As we repress more of ourselves, when we put more of ourselves into the shadow, we become unbalanced. Especially if our shadow gets larger than our identity here, our ego identity. We can put so much of ourselves in the shadow that our ego identity is so small. And that's where we might have extreme mental health concerns like psychosis. That's kind of led me into my working with those with schizophrenia. I studied dream work and shadow work, and I was noticing patterns with my clients that, those who say, for example, heard voices. The more and more we talked about the voices that they would hear and what they would say, that I more and more realized that those were shadow aspects of themselves that they repressed. The negative things that the voices told them were actually things that they believed about themselves, but they've been repressed so much that now they are being experienced as if they are being spoken outside their heads to themselves. But it's really unconscious material surfacing. And that's what Carl Jung believed too, that the difference between, someone that's suffering from psychosis and someone that's maybe more higher function is that the person who's suffering from psychosis cannot integrate unconscious material. The unconscious material is coming up, and unconscious material comes up as a lot of things, but a lot of times it's images, images is like symbols and those types of things. A good example of unconscious material is dream life. When we have a dream, that dream is unconscious material. It's stuff coming from ourselves, but it's not accessible from our conscious egoic perspective. And why this is important? This is important because with my studies with psychedelic therapy, I started noticing a pattern as well. Is that what is psychedelic therapy? What is it really doing? What's the function? What's going on? And the more and more I'm looking at the research, and the more and more it shows that what's happening is that instead of going to therapy for 10 years with a therapist, instead of going to, say most people, have a therapist, they might do talk therapy. For example, let's say someone's suffering from PTSD. They might go to a therapist maybe one time a week, every week. PTSD is very hard to work with because of the situation being so traumatic. As soon as you start talking about it, our defenses go up. So it's very hard to do progress in a quick, efficient way, because every time a therapist touches upon something and the client's PTSD is triggered, their defenses go up, and then the session has to move or go to something else. It's a constant like touching upon it, walking away, touching upon it, walking away, and that can take decades. It can take at least 10 years to see like progressive change.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about psychedelic therapy, what it does, it literally turns off the egoic defenses temporarily for like that, say for psilocybin, maybe 5 to 8 hours. And what's important about this is that the ego is really the person that's controlling the unconscious material. But when the ego kind of takes a break, all that unconscious material just like erupts. And that being said, this can be very overwhelming for some people, right? We talked about people talking about having near-death experiences because that's the ego, disappearing temporarily, or and not all experiences are super pleasant. The shadow is not pleasant. The shadow aspects of ourselves are very uncomfortable, and we hear a lot about like bad trips or uncomfortable situations and things of that nature. This was like all this research was coming to that point of like, okay, so if psychedelics are releasing, or the egoic's hold on unconscious material, and all this unconscious material is erupting, how should the therapist that's facilitating the session, what kind of training should they have in order to work with the unconscious material effectively?
Yeah.
And this is very important because when we talk about the unconscious mind, and I can, the best way I can like kind of explain it is like if we talk about, I don't know if you ever seen that movie Inception.
Yes.
Yeah, about dreaming, and the movie was about implanting dreams and how people can implant dreams in someone's subconscious, and it can like become something in their conscious awareness. Well, it's very similar when we're talking about psychedelic therapy or even hypnosis, right? That's why most people who practice hypnosis and psychotherapy, they usually like record the sessions for legal reasons, because when you're working on this level of the subconscious, it can be dangerous, right? Just like when we're working with someone's dreams, right? If you have a dream and you come to, for example, say if you come to me as a client, and I'm here with the title doctor, and you tell me a dream, and I interpret it to you, and you believe me because I have the doctor title, you might make choices in your life based upon what I said. The reason why I bring this up though is just because of how much responsibility a person who is working with clients undergoing this type of treatment, there's a lot of responsibility, because working on this level can be extremely dangerous and harmful if not trained in the proper way. And that's where I'm going towards, is like, what kind of training should someone have when working with unconscious materials, symbolic meaning, and those types of things, shadow work, and those types of subjects.
Yes, and I am so delighted for this conversation. I think because in my own form of synchronicity, each year we have to go to a different training site. I'm sure maybe you do something similar where you have to do clinical hours at that site. And so I just matched for my site next year on Monday of this week. And I matched at a site that does ketamine-assisted psychotherapy.
In what city?
In Chicago. And I was like, when am I going to get to talk about this on the podcast and say that I'm doing this sort of thing? And then here you are saying, we got to talk about what therapists need to do this effectively. And I'm like, that's a great question. What do I need to know, before, obviously I'll be guided by, the doctors there. But like, this is a great question for me because I'm going to literally be doing this work come this summer.
Yeah. So it's, and this is a very important piece, because again, like in these sessions, no matter if it's someone bringing a dream or someone having a psychedelic therapy session, the images and experiences that are released by the unconscious are symbolic to the individual that's having the experience. For example, again, if you're the client and you're bringing a dream into the session, or if you're the client and you're having a psychedelic therapy session, everything that comes up from your unconscious, it's in a language specifically it's like every image and symbol is coming from your unconscious. So only you can really know or have any kind of say so what those images actually mean to you. How can I say this better?
Yeah, it's your own subconscious language, right? It's a code of symbols. It's
exactly
your own. It's your web dings, right?
Yeah, and I look at it as like there's a message that's like, there's a message that came out in all these different images, and as a therapist, all I'm doing is trying to like go with the client, and we have to go through the whole codex and we have to get every single image that came up, and then I have to ask the client, like, okay, what do you associate with that image? And once we get that association, that's kind of like a word in the puzzle.
Yeah, I've got a question. So when
Yeah.
you remember your dreams, do you like when you wake up in the morning, do you have like a visual memory of your dream that you can remember these images from, or like how?
No, like I mean, like when I say, like, for example, like when I wake up from a dream, my dream journal is on my desk.
Okay, so
on my nightstand, so I'll grab it and I'll write down the dream. For example, say like I dream of a lion, right? And then if I go to then maybe I might go talk to someone about it. And what I'm saying though is, like, no one can tell me what that lion means, but only I know what that lion means. I just have to remember what it means. So it's really an act of remembering, just like everything, like all the images in your subconscious, they're your images. So when you come with an image, say you have an experience, and when you come with an image, only you can tell me what it means. Because you might have forgot. So my job as a therapist is try to help you remember what you associate with that image.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Have you heard of aphantasia?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you're so interested in neuro, or you come from a neuro background. I wanted to bring it up because that's what I have. So I have no mind's eye. So when you tell me to bring someone to the table, it's a completely black room. There is no ability to conjure up any images.
Okay.
Yeah, which is such a fascinating aspect of my identity, who I am, because then when I think about my own memories, I've got none to look at in my head. So I'm curious, even when you're talking about images here, like what images, if you don't have one, then is it?
It could also be like, again, it's like I mean, I'm using the word images just because that's like very common in just in-depth psychology. But it can be like, again, like it can just be writing down. When I write down my dreams, I don't like draw a picture. I don't see it like that. I write down basically like what I can remember of the actual what happened.
Yeah.
I write down like the storyline, but also I'll be curious to just like I would also be curious though, like if you ever had maybe like a entheogen experience, and did you have any visuals?
None. This is the thing that I've been talking to people about, because just talking about having bad trips and other things, I get no visuals like that. I mean, obviously the room might be a little wavy or colors might be a little bit more strong, but when I close my eyes, it's still black, nothing, which I wonder if maybe that makes it easier for me to deal with, Then
how about dreaming? Like do you have dream recollection when you wake up?
Yes, I do. And from what I understand, I dream in images, because I remember seeing people and things happen and stuff, but the second I wake up and I try to remember, it's all black. It's just like a feeling of the storyline, the plot. And that's kind of how I remember life, right? It's a plot for me. I don't have like visual memories.
Okay. So yeah, that's great. I mean, like, again, like when I wake up, I will record with my dream, and it's basically the storyline.
Sure, yeah.
Like scene 1, this happened. Scene 2, this happened. Scene 3, this happened.
Which I could start doing,
that's what I do. And then I usually, the way that we practice is then we'll go to someone else, because it's hard. Because once you wake up, your ego takes over control again. So that's why it's so difficult. We dream, we have unconscious material come up.
Yeah.
And then when we wake up, our ego takes control again. So we can't. It's very difficult for us to just know what those things are. So the way we practice is we use a second person or a group of people. So I'm trained in both. I'm trained in either doing dream working by Jeremy Taylor, which where we use like a group of people. I also trained in dream tending by Steve Eisenstadt, where it's more like a one-on-one. But anyways, the other person would then basically, as you shared the dream, the other person would write it down word for word, what you said. And then they will start asking questions about certain things. So like if you dreamt of a lion, I would ask, okay, so tell me, like, when you think about a lion, like what comes to your mind? What do you know about lions? Do you have any memories of a lion? And we just we go through that whole, we go through your mind, and to see what your associations are. What you associate with a lion would be very different than what I associate with a lion. So like for me, I might say like, oh, Christianity, Jesus Christ, the sun god, Aslan, Chronicles of Narnia. Like, like I might go down a different stream versus you might go down a different stream. And this is where, unfortunately, this is where like these dream interpretation books, they miss. I don't recommend them. But if they work for people, they're good for amplification That's another process, but they should probably be used after the process of a personal association. So like usually I would ask the client, like, what does the line mean to you? And after they kind of find their personal associations, then maybe I might look for an amplification. Like, okay, well, it's interesting that you said this. This is another, so it just, I just bring that up. So we do that after we record your dream. We look at all the everything that comes out in your dream. We'll circle different images. We'll associate those images to your own personal life, and then it's interesting. But eventually, a story or something will come. A message will come out. Something will come out. There'll be some kind of synchronistic story or thing that comes out, and all of a sudden, you might be like, "Okay, that's odd." That now I like you. Eventually, what we call like an aha moment. So like after this process. Throughout the process, there might be a moment where you might have this aha recognition of like, you remember what it means. And it's because someone else helped you go around those egoic defenses to kind of like, to withdraw the meanings behind these unconscious material. And it's the same thing with psychedelic therapy. You might have an experience and then the most important part is the day afterwards where you meet with the therapist and they help what we say, like make meaning of the images or whatever came up, the meaning making process and the integration process of what came up. That's what's going to create like long lasting change.
From what I understand of what, the protocols are for like a more like modern medicine way of what they're trying to, what Compass, the big, corporation is trying to get the patent on is like, that process of keeping your eyes closed, covered. And so at that point, like images are coming up for people, right? I would imagine who don't have what I have. So then, it's learning like what that coding can mean to you, because I think that also makes sense to part of me is skeptical, first acknowledging that. Second part of me is like, okay, that kind of makes sense because of symbolic language. I think when you made that distinction between like a book that says this is what a lion means versus, hey, let's ask you with your own lived experience, what does a lion mean to you? I think that's a really big distinction. It's not like you're just saying like all dreams can be understood through this. It's more like, what is your brain trying to make sense of through this and through using a symbol that means something to you? And so like, that your subconscious language there.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so much to talk about on the subject, so it's so hard. But I mean, because my fascination was when it came to these medicines, these psychedelic medicines, was how does the same medicine know that one client wants to quit smoking, and it will give that client images that's going to help them quit smoking, but then another client who suffers from anxiety will ask the same medicine with their intent for help to alleviate the anxiety, and that client will have different images that will surface for them. Then I have a third client that has depression, will ask the medicine that their intent is to alleviate their depression, and they will have even different images that surfaces for what they ask for it. So my question was like, how does the medicine know your intent and what you want to alleviate, and how does it know what images it's going to take for you to alleviate that? And that for me, that was like the first signpost to like, there's some type of intelligence in this medicine. I mean, just that like why is the same medicine given to different people for different reasons? How does it know what you're asking for it, what intent you're sharing with it, and how does it know what images it's going to take to heal that part or reclaim that part of your lost soul or your broken, fragmented psyche?
Sure.
How does it initiate that? How does it know, oh, you want this? Let me release the floodgate on this unconscious material, and then afterwards, we have these high success rates of like 67% of people being cured of all these types of things. I mean, it's just. And so go ahead.
And so you're saying that all three of those people were cured, or just the first one? All three of them got the images that they asked for. Okay.
So like, and that's in the scientific studies right now, is just that across the board we're using psychedelic therapy for all these different things with conditions. High success rates, 67% success rates. For example, someone who has treatment resistant depression, which means that normal treatment or is not really working for them. They're labeled as treatment resistant for depression. But then they come and do a psychedelic therapy session one time, and they don't qualify for the same diagnoses for up to 12 months in just one session. Then we asked, the people, like, would you rather take, antidepressants every day for the whole year, or just do one psychedelic session for 5 hours one time a year?
Yeah.
And so the science is out there. I mean, anyone can look these up. I have tons of resources of like all these different studies. So we know that they are effective, and we know that they work, and people are out there doing that studies. But my studies are more like, how are they doing it? Like, how are they doing it? What's the psychological processes? And I'm looking at it obviously from a depth psychological lens.
Sure.
But then I'm also going to bring in my intersection of indigenous and Western perspectives to figure out what does Western medicine have to say, why and how these substances work on the client. And then I'm going to also research what does the indigenous healers say, how and why these work.
Yeah, definitely. Because I feel like what's coming to me now when you ask, like, how does the plant know to give these images to these people? My initial thought is it doesn't. Like, that is giving the plant medicine a power that I think is really located within us and what we're setting for our intention. Yeah. But also saying that also I think would not be fair to the years of spiritual lineage and indigenous cultures that have a completely different take, right? And so like that, and I'm obviously coming within a very Western, neuro lens. So I'm over here like, no, it's us. But so I want to hold space for the duality of both those things. So I think it's a great question to ask.
It is. And it's interesting because I'm the same way. Like I said, again, like I am, my training's in Western medicine. So it's like, it's the therapy.
Yes.
And that's why it's called drug assisted psychotherapy. And most people would agree that the therapy is being assisted. And I also agree with that too. Like I said, like the medicine is reducing the egoic defenses, allowing us to touch into material that's more vulnerable. So it is assisting the psychotherapeutic process, which is interesting because normally if you think of any other kind of medications, Western medicine would say the opposite, right? If we, like Western medicine would say like, oh, antidepressants are more important, or like like we put so much power, praise, whatever you want to call it. Like we look at the pharmaceutical companies and say like, oh, we put pharmaceuticals above talk therapy. Normally we will put like a psychiatrist and their recommendation and medications over like going to talk therapy or talking to a person, which is interesting. But now we're over here talking about drug assisted psychotherapy, and we're saying like, oh yeah, it's the psychotherapy part. But yeah, I follow you that, and that's why I'm curious. Like, I wonder what the indigenous perspectives would have to say on this matter.
Yeah.
And I already know, how they refer to some medications, like say ayahuasca. They call ayahuasca the grandmother.
Yeah.
The grandmother spirit, and you offer what you need to be healed to the grandmother spirit, and and then she'll heal that for you. So they would probably see it more as like the plant medicine, and the plants themselves having a spirit. But I think that comes from like more of that. Yeah, that's the more like the different way of looking at things. They look at the environment as having soul and life and spirits and those types of things, and that's very important too. And how can we find a middle ground between the two perspectives?
Yes, exactly. Have you seen Fantastic Fungi? I'm sure you have.
Beautiful.
Okay, right, exactly. Yes. So this was one of those big things for me with my neuroscience Western lens was like, like it's not the plant medicine. But then I think it was, I know. Then sitting through that and seeing them talk about that the fungi actually share resources to nearby trees that need it more. Just even that level of sharing made me kind of take a step back to think, wow, there is so much here that maybe we just haven't been able to tap with the way that we're asking questions and the way that our scientific process, in, quantitative methods, all these sort of things that kind of restrict other ways of knowing that we as humans know and can find out stuff. And now we're just starting to touch and to learn more about how fungi are actually sharing resources and communicating with other fungi and trees and connecting us. Like, there's clearly more here to this story than I think we understand from our Western science lens currently.
And I think that's beautiful because I mean that's the important piece of it. It's like there are other ways of knowing, and there's also other states of consciousness. And I think we're finally revisiting these other ways of knowing and these altered states. And we're using these altered states on many different levels, right? We have, psychedelics and mental health, but they're also doing research because now they know that psychedelics can actually lead to neurogenesis. Before, we thought that human beings were born with a certain number of brain cells, and you want to protect them because you can't get them back. And if you do this or that, you might jeopardize some brain cells, and they're never going to grow back. But now with research, we know that psychedelics actually can lead to neurogenesis. That's even leading us to more ways of healing. Like, what does that mean for those suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's? All those types of other things where this is fascinating. We also have those in the tech industry using microdosing psychedelics to enhance creativity, problem solve, because we know that during a temporary timeline of when your brain is under these medications or plant medicines, that we actually have an increase in neuropathway accessibility. So we're having people using them more like a mind hack, right? Now we're using these plant medicines. They're as brain enhancements, or some people even call them mind hacks. People in those tech industries in Silicon Valley are using these medicines to increase neuroconnectivity, creativity, problem solving. All this, it's interesting where all of these pathways are, where this subject is moving towards in the current day today.
Definitely, yeah. And I mean, I'm a big fan of the concept of microdosing. I feel like it slows down your life to a more breathable pace where you can actually feel the present moment, which I think is so powerful for our creativity. And yeah, I mean, we are just at the beginning here of all the different ways that this is going to change how we understand ourselves. And I think I think a lot of people who might be, a little bit uncomfortable with concepts like the ego and shadow and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's important also to remember a lot of this is language, and it can be conceptualized in different ways, right? I mean, I know you're queer, I'm a queer woman, so in my path, we could conceptualize my ego being something that tried to squelch my queerness because at the time it wasn't a safe thing, and so that was stuck in my shadow, something that ended up being bigger than me, and so there is, naturally a discomfort with that because I'm not being authentic. That's more of what the existential lens and the framework here is that, Nicole, you weren't being authentic. The Jungian would be your shadow is overtaking you. And I think at the core of it is, these same core concepts of who are you as a person? Who do you want to be? And how is society trying to control you in different ways and not let you be your authentic self? That's more my existentialist lens. But I think it's the same language, different terms. And this study here with psychedelics and altered states of consciousness, I think is so ripe for the concept of spirituality and your Jungian philosophy. So I'm so excited to see what your dissertation comes out to be. And I want you to send all of those articles my way as someone who's going to be doing this healing work and does it personally. I'd love to know, how can I be a better, person for conducting these things? How can it be, more beneficial? I'm, just so excited for you.
Yeah, and I'm excited too, and I'm excited to just be a part of it. To be a part of it and be part of the next wave of. I mean, I'm meeting so many other healers in my social media page, which is Queering Therapy. It's on Instagram. But I'm getting a lot of contacts from other healers and therapists around the world saying where do I get trained? How do I get into this? Where should I go? There's not much information about what type of modalities or schools of thoughts would be beneficial for this work. For this work.
Theoretical orientations. Transpersonal.
I mean, transpersonal, of course. With Stan Groff, I mean, of course, it falls under the depth psychology umbrella. So we're in an interesting point, and I think all of us, all these new waves of healers and people who are getting into this field, we're really going to be the next generation of guiding others into this work. And it's exciting, and I can't wait for. Hopefully, everything passes for California legalization. I know the bill is up for voting hopefully this year.
Oh, it is. I'm not
Yeah.
following California politics. So
Yeah.
is it for the legalization of medical or recreational?
I mean, most of the bills I've been seeing was for decriminalization.
Oh, okay.
So basically, it just means that the state wouldn't spend money on criminalizing or prosecuting people
Sure.
for possessing personal amounts of psychedelics. It doesn't mean it's legal. It doesn't mean you can like mass produce them and sell them. It's just more the decriminalizing personal use. And I think it was a very good way for
Good step.
for the movement.
Yep.
Because it makes sense, right?
Yes.
Like what like we should have autonomy over our own consciousness, and if we want to utilize something to expand the consciousness, we should be able to, and we should not only be allowed to repress our consciousness or
alcohol, love that.
alcohol or
Yep.
other things. We should also or prescription medications, but we should also be allowed to expand it.
Yes.
And I think the decriminalization route is a good route to begin with.
Definitely one of that first steps. Yeah, to that whole journey. There's so much joy here that we both get to be clinicians in this space and kind of pioneer this. I share that same excitement with you, where it's just like, wow, like how novel it is to be entering into this and yeah, bringing the truth of an indigenous practice for thousands of years, hopefully into our Western lens. And yeah, I think you're asking great questions of how do we honor that history, right? Not just whitewash over something that has been used for decades for healing, for humanity.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. This has been really good. I've loved getting to hear your passion and your enthusiasm. It's so palpable that this is something that you're excited to study. I do ask everyone on the podcast one closing question, and it is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal? And you can take that anywhere you want. Literally anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really get into it, but just I do a lot of work studying numinous experiences, and numinous is a term by Rudolf Otto describing when a person meets maybe or has a divine experience or meeting with the divine, and he describes such experiences as being like mysterious, fascinating, as well as tremendous. There's an awness and fearfulness. That being said, numinous experiences are a meeting experiences of coming in confrontation with the divine. Those types of experiences are very powerful, and and I think a lot of us have stories of such. And I bring this up because they're really prevalent in dreams as well as psychedelic sessions, and it has been shown that when someone has a numinous experience, those are very motivating for change in that person's life. And I've been having a lot of people reach out to me to share their numinous experiences, but they don't feel comfortable sharing it other people just out in the public or in their families or even friends. I think there's some kind of taboo of that a religious or mystical or a numinous experience should only happen within like in a religious institution, right? You should only if you want a religious experience, you should go read a Bible. If you want and I'm just using the Bible because I was raised Catholic.
Sure. Yeah.
And even Carl Jung said this himself. His dad was a pastor, and Carl Jung made a comment of how sad it was that his father devoted his whole life being a pastor, but never had his own experience of God. Versus Carl Jung was kind of removed from the church, but he knew that he had his own numinous experience. So here he's juxtaposing his experience versus his father's experience, who spent his whole life in the institution. And that's kind of his preaching, is that like there are numinous experiences that happens in synchronicities and all kinds of different scenarios, and it's attainable for anyone. And we need to really start to like break down that taboo that we can have a spiritual experience outside of religious institution. Especially, I just bring this up because of my queerness. A lot of us don't feel safe in religious institutions. Doesn't mean that they can't have a sense of spirituality or a sense of connection with the divine themselves, those experiences and connections are out there. And I would just, if I could have anything normalized, it would be, searching for that spiritual life, that spiritual connection in whatever way someone feels called to do so. They could even be, like my church is running. When I go on a run and I'm out in nature, that's my church. That's how I praise and give gratitude.
Yep.
And that's mine. That's me. Yep. That's just what I do. Someone else might go into nature, go for a hike, or go swimming in the river. Like that might be their church. Whatever it is for anybody, it could also be, it could be anything. But I'm just saying, I really would hope that one day we can really allow, everyone accessibility to a spiritual life, without, having feelings of taboo or being blasphemous.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, right. As you said that, I was thinking every Sunday I go rock climbing and I call it church, and I've always called it church. And I tell people this is church. I get my community with my people. I have my meditation. I move my body and I feel energetic afterwards. And I think coming equally from, I came from a Christian background, went to Christian school, queer, we probably had very similar experiences from this. I think it was really hard for me to come to any sense of spirituality after having such a toxic experience that made me feel unsafe in my identity with this religious. So I really blocked out any sense of spirituality for so long. But I also think that what we define as spirituality should be what heals us. And I think that has a way bigger expansiveness than just like, oh, this religion or that. It's like, oh, you find that healing and it brings you energy. Beautiful. That is healing for you. That is your spirituality. And so that has been such an evolution for me to reconceptualize what does it mean to be spiritual? Because I think it does have such a negative connotation of being woo-woo, hippie, not grounded in neuroscience sort of thing, right? So I love that you're bringing that up to normalize that, and hopefully we get towards this space of, more expansiveness in what we understand spirituality to be. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I really want to thank you. I knew this was a big thing for you too, of using your voice for the first time. And so probably not the first time, right? But like in a public platform, like we discussed earlier. So I just want to say thank you so much. And
thank you.
Yeah, I hope you're proud of your voice when you listen back to it, because you were so strong and shared so much wisdom that I think people will benefit from.
Well, thank you for inviting me onto your podcast.
If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you're a part of the Anarchist community, then follow us on Instagram or nominate a guest for the show by sending in a letter to modernanarchypodcast@gmail.com. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.